Welcome. Take a slow, deep breath and let your thoughts settle. Tonight we travel back to a quieter age, not one of kings or crusades, but of stone, dust, and patient craftsmanship. This is the world of the Gothic cathedral builders, the men whose hands shaped the bones of Europe's sacred monuments, one chisel mark at a time. Imagine yourself standing before a great unfinished cathedral in the 13th century. The morning air is cool, faintly chalky with powdered limestone. Scaffolding rises like a wooden forest around walls that stretch toward the heavens. From within that maze of beams and platforms comes the soft, steady rhythm of mallets striking chisels, the heartbeat of the medieval world. This is not the story of saints or princes. It is the story of those who built their dreams into stone, the humble carvers and masons whose work outlasted them all. Tonight we'll explore the rhythm of their days, the grand visions that inspired them, the hidden symbols they left behind, and the striking contrast between their modest lives and the splendor of the cathedrals they created. So find a comfortable position, let your breathing slow, and imagine the sound of chisels echoing softly through the early light. As we begin our quiet journey into the lives of the stone carvers of the Gothic age, morning begins early. The first pale light of dawn filters through mist, washing the half-built cathedral in soft gold. From the nearby cottages, small groups of men walk toward the site, their breath visible in the chill. They carry their tools carefully, chisels wrapped in leather, mallets smooth from years of use, and bits of chalk tied in cloth. The smell of lime and damp timber fills the air. Each mason knows his place. Some work in the open yard, shaping rough blocks fresh from the quarry. Others climb high up the scaffolds, balancing on planks, while the wind moves gently around them. The rhythm of the day begins not with haste, but with patient repetition. The first strike of the hammer, the faint ring of steel, the quiet crumbling of stone. A fine dust rises with each blow, catching the sunlight like a thin, drifting fog. There is little talk while they work. The labor demands focus, a steady mind, and a steady hand. Some hum softly, repeating the same few notes of a hymn, their voices blending with the tapping all around them. The air seems to vibrate with that rhythm, a music of faith in stone. Around them, the cathedral yard stirs with other life. Apprentices fetch water and sand. Craftsmen grind pigments for mortar. Cranes creak as massive blocks are hoisted into place. The whole site moves in quiet harmony, each task small but essential. From the distance, the bells of a nearby church ring out the hour. Their sound carried on the wind, like a reminder of why this great building is rising at all. Each man knows he may never see the cathedral completed. The work will take generations. Carver may spend his whole life shaping just one small corner, a cluster of leaves curling around a pillar, the robe of a saint above a doorway. Yet there is pride in that smallness. Each strike of the chisel is an act of devotion, each carved line a silent prayer. At midday, they pause. The workers gather in the shade of the unfinished walls, sitting among piles of stone. They unwrap their simple meals, bread, cheese, perhaps a little fish or dried fruit. Their conversation drifts lazily, talk of whether the progress of the work or the price of tools in the next town. They eat slowly, looking up from time to time at the towering framework above them, both awed and weary. When the meal is done, work resumes. The sun drifts lower, the light deepens, and the shadows of the scaffolds stretch long across the courtyard. The tapping continues, soft, persistent, and strangely peaceful. Each sound feels like the passing of time itself, marking not hours, but centuries. As evening falls, the men clean their tools and climb down. Their clothes are white with dust, their hands rough and strong. They walk home through narrow streets, where the smell of hearth smoke and bread fills the air. Some will stay here for years. Others will soon move on, following new projects to distant towns. They are travelers bound not by land or lord, but by their craft, a brotherhood that crosses borders and languages. When night settles, the city grows quiet. The unfinished cathedral stands dark and still beneath the stars, its towers skeletal, its arches reaching into shadow. Perhaps a single mason, walking home late, pauses to look back at the vast structure. He knows he will never see it finished, and yet, in the rhythm of his work, he has already touched eternity. The sound of the chisels fades, replaced by the soft sigh of the wind through empty scaffolds. The cathedral rests, half-made but already wholly sleeping, as the builders themselves will soon sleep, waiting for the next day's dawn and the steady rhythm to begin again. Among the countless cathedrals that rose from the medieval soil, few became as iconic as Chartres and Notre-Dame de Paris. Their stories are as much about human endurance as divine inspiration. Imagine Chartres in the early 13th century, a town alive with rebuilding after a devastating fire. Out of ruin came renewal. The master masons arrived, setting out their plans upon wide wooden tables, drawing careful lines in chalk. The cathedral would rise higher, lighter, and more filled with glass than any before it. The builders worked without modern tools or machinery. The stones were cut by hand, hoisted by pulleys, powered by tread wheels, enormous wooden wheels, turned by men walking within them like patient animals. Each column, each arch, was placed by judgment, not measurement. A mason's eye was his most trusted instrument. In Paris, the building of Notre-Dame had begun decades earlier. The project would span more than a century, generations of craftsmen adding their part. Guided by master builders whose names survive only faintly in records, de Sully, de Cormont, and others. The cathedral grew not by a single vision, but by many, layered like the stones themselves. High on the scaffolding, the sculptors worked on the facades, saints, kings, and angels emerging slowly from rough limestone. Their faces are familiar, yet unknown. Many were modeled after the workers themselves, or after townspeople who came to watch the progress. In this way, ordinary lives found immortality in sacred stone. At night, when the workers left, the foreman would walk the site, inspecting the day's work by lamplight. They noted cracks, misalignments, or imperfections in the joints. The light flickered across the carvings, bringing them briefly to life before darkness reclaimed them. The masons' lodges, their communal quarters, were places of learning and fraternity. Young apprentices studied geometry, scripture, and the sacred proportions believed to link heaven and earth. They learned to carve not only with precision but with reverence, for every curve of a column was a reflection of divine order. It was slow, deliberate work, the kind of patience that modern life rarely allows. Each block of stone bore the memory of the hand that shaped it. And though centuries have passed, those fingerprints remain, faintly beneath layers of dust and time. Even now, if you walk through the great cathedrals of Europe and look closely at the stones, you may see small, carved symbols, initials, stars, crosses, spirals. These are masons' marks, each one unique to its maker. They were both signature and safeguard, a way to measure pay, to ensure quality, and to leave behind a quiet legacy. But some marks are more mysterious. Tucked away in corners or hidden behind later additions, strange figures and geometric designs have been found, patterns that seem to follow no obvious function. Some scholars believe they were coded signs, passed within the guilds to protect sacred knowledge of geometry and proportion. Others think they were simply sketches, idle doodles made during long hours of work. Whatever their meaning, they create a kind of whispering dialogue between the builders and those who walk beneath their work centuries later. The walls, it seems, are alive with memory. Beneath the cathedrals, archaeologists have uncovered traces of old workshops, half-finished carvings, discarded tools, fragments of pigment. In some places, initials scratched into stonemark, where apprentices practice their craft, repeating patterns again and again before being trusted with the real work. These relics speak not of grandeur, but of persistence, the quiet, enduring discipline that lies beneath beauty. And then there are the gargoyles, those curious, sometimes playful, sometimes haunting figures that perch along the eaves. They serve a practical purpose, carrying rainwater from the roof. But they are also symbolic reminders of sin, protection, or simply the mason's humor peeking through sacred architecture. In their faces, some see laughter, others warning. Each mark, each carving, each hidden motif tells us something about the humanity behind the holiness, that even in the midst of solemn devotion, the builders could leave a trace of themselves, both humble and eternal. In the shadow of the cathedral, life below was far different from the splendor above. While bishops debated theology and nobles commissioned stained glass, the masons lived modestly, often in shared rooms, eating coarse bread and thin broth. Their work was valued, but their names rarely recorded. Meanwhile, within the bishop's residence, the air was rich with incense and wine. Clerics discussed scripture by candlelight, their robes heavy with embroidery. For them, the cathedral was a symbol of divine order and earthly power, a monument to both faith and wealth. The craftsmen saw it differently. To them, it was a living thing, a patient creature taking shape day by day. They worked not for glory, but for the satisfaction of creation itself. To feel the smooth edge of a carving beneath their fingertips, to see sunlight spill through the rose window they helped support. Sometimes the two worlds touched. A bishop might walk the site, offering blessing or correction. The masons would pause, hats in hand, the dust of their labor clinging to their hair and beards. The exchange was brief, polite, and distant. The bishop would move on, his silken robe brushing against walls that were still rough to the touch. And yet, despite their differences, both groups, the powerful and the humble, shared in a single act of devotion. The cathedral needed them both. The bishop's vision gave it purpose. The carver's patience gave it form. When the great doors finally opened and sunlight filled the nave, it was the laborers who stood at the back, quiet and unnoticed, watching the light move across their work. For them, the true reward was not praise, but permanence, the knowledge that their hands had touched something that would outlast centuries. And so, as night falls once more over the stone spires of Europe, the carver's legacy endures. The walls they built still breathe, their marks still traceable beneath centuries of wear. The rhythm of their chisels has long faded, but its echo lives in every arch and vault. Imagine now the empty cathedral at dusk, the great space hushed, the air faintly cool, the stone glowing with the last light of day. Perhaps if you listen closely, you can almost hear the faint sound of hammer and chisel, somewhere deep within the walls. The builders are long gone, their names forgotten, yet their work endures, patient and timeless, waiting for each dawn to spill new light across the carvings they left behind. And as you rest, you might think of them. The quiet laborers of faith and stone whose slow, careful hands built something meant to last forever. Their world was steady, rhythmic, filled with devotion and dust. A world that invites you now to close your eyes, slow your breathing, and drift gently into sleep.